Hey, gang, what's going on? Welcome back for another episode of the podcast that reboots your thinking about farming, ranching, food systems, and the people that operate them. I'm your host, Brian Alexander. Every week on Ranching Reboot Podcast, we bring you stories from fresh faces in the industry and veterans who've been in the trenches for decades. Make sure you're following along on social media. You can find all my feeds under Red Hills Rancher on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, did you know there's a video version of the podcast? That's right. Not only can you enjoy Ranching Reboot as an audio podcast, you can watch along on Spotify or YouTube. And, for some of you millennials, there's captions, so you can understand what we're saying. Maybe some other platforms could do it, but those are the two that I use. This season of Ranching Reboot is sponsored by Land Trust, the Recreation Access Network. And this week, I want to talk about Land Trust Plus, your ultimate toolkit to hunt private. With Land Trust Plus, you'll be the first to know about new properties, get updates from landowners, book next season with confidence, and get deals on the very best gear on the market today, like Mossy Oak, Quiet Cat electric bicycles, HuntWise, and on the Onyx app. Whether you're into fishing, hunting, camping, or farm tours, Land Trust has something for you. Just click the link in the show notes to learn more. Our friends at the Harris family at Wild Ass Soap Company want me to tell you about the Graze Master Group's upcoming field day and event called Paths to Profitability, Wednesday, July 24th at the Denton Community Center, and also on Brian Burhill's farm. I hope I'm saying that right. I didn't get a pronunciation guide. The field day starts at 8 a.m. and runs all day with a packed schedule. I wish I had the time to attend, and since I can't go, you should. That's the Paths to Profitability Field Day, Denton, Nebraska, Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. To find out more information or to get registered early, just go to www.grazemastergroup.com/events. That's grazemastergroup.com/events. You might also check the show notes for a link. I'll try to put one in there. A couple other things. If you aren't subscribed to the podcast, I'd ask that you please do so. It really helps me out. Something else that really helps, and I know how much you all want to help me keep making awesome content. Likes, shares, and here's the biggie, guys. Reviews. I really need some fresh reviews. So if you haven't already, please take a minute or two out of your day and leave the podcast a review on whatever platform you choose to listen. That's it. Simple ask. All right, my guest today is somebody I would consider a mentor in the fact that he always seems to know what's going on behind the curtains of the beef industry. When I started this podcast, you'll remember that I promised to tell stories of the new faces of regenerative ag and also bring history lessons from the guys who watched it happen. This week's show is one of those industry vets. Mr. Ranch Foods Direct himself, Mike Callicrate, joins me for his, 7th appearance on the podcast. Kind of lost track at this point. Mike and I don't always agree on everything, but I always appreciate his take on the industry and the approach that he took to find his own niche in a very complicated industry. And I think you will too. Here we go. Mr. Callicrate, thanks for joining me again, sir. How are you today?
I'm good. We've got warmer weather and some rain, and things are looking better, environmentally at least. Did I lose you, Brian?
Hang on. Zoom is changing things. I don't know why.
Okay.
There. It should be better. Rain. You said rain? What's that?
Well, we had 2 inches of rain in St. Francis, and it came kind of hard, but man, we needed it so bad. But last year we started out with some moisture, and then we got this epic hailstorm that wiped everything out. In fact, our cows are just going back to grass on that ground now after leaving it for a whole year to try to heal it up. And this year we got pea-size hail with that 2-inch rain. But again, up north by Ray, Colorado, they got absolutely devastated. There was baseball-size hail in there. And last year, the hailstorm that got us, it went from like Scottsbluff, Nebraska to Goodland, Kansas, 5 miles wide. And this year we missed the terrible stuff in this last storm. But still, it's bad what happened up at Ray, Colorado. It wiped out a lot of stuff. A lot of wheat's gone. And
okay. Now that I'm thinking about it, I've had some ugly hail here. I've never had baseball size hail here at the house or at the ranch. It was maybe something like 10 years ago. had some customer cows, and we had a really rough storm come through, and it was probably like pea to marble size hail.
Mm-hmm.
But there were places where there was enough hail that it looked like there was snow drifts.
Sure. Yeah,
And
we get that here. We get it here worse than you do, but you get tornadoes that we don't get.
right. Well, where I was getting at, that hailstorm hit in paddock, like it was kind of almost centered on a paddock where I had a bunch of cows. And kind of on a survey, it basically stripped 250 acres. Like it just laid 250 acres worth of grass and forage flat on the ground. It stripped all the leaves and needles off all the trees. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is, and I know the cows were they were kind of slow for a couple days after that, because I could tell, they got beat up and sore. How do cows deal with baseball size hail? What happens?
Oh, it rips them up pretty bad. I mean, it'll put some serious bruises in them. In fact, last year when that bad hailstorm hit us up in Ray, they had this sort of discs shaped hail that actually cut the backs on the animals. It left them bleeding. I've never seen anything like that until last year. But at our place, we slaughter every week for Ranch Foods Direct. And we had to delay slaughter for 2 weeks just to heal up the cattle, because you can imagine what those bruises would have done to your high dollar cuts, your rib and your strip, and, all of that would have been damaged. But so we just delayed slaughter for 2 weeks and still saw some injury and some bruising, but we had to kind of move on. But I tell you, we work so hard to grow grass and to sort of regenerate some of these pasture lands, and then we're hit with 10, 12 years of drought, and you finally end up in a spring where there's hope to grow something, and the hail gets you. I mean, the risks are so big, and we're sitting here being forced into these supply chains that are just going to enslave the hell out of us, and never be compensated enough to be able to stand the risks that even Mother Nature gives us, let alone other risks like, death, loss, and disease, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, and Mother Nature's getting meaner. I remember when I first got out of college, I saddled a horse every day and heat detected cows, and there would be 2 weeks in a row where you really never saw the sunshine. This was in 1975, 1976. Kind of late 70s. And it was amazing. I mean, we had these huge regional rains that would cover, all of eastern Colorado, western Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska. And we would just simply drench a nice, slow, rain that would really give us some deep moisture that we needed. We have not had that. It's gone. Now it's thunderstorms. So your neighbor will get 2 inches and you won't get anything. And of course, you've signed up for some of these government programs, where the drought insurance and that sort of thing, and you never get a check because, hey, your neighbor got rain. What's your problem? Or they took a satellite photo and, hey, it looks green. What's your problem? And so that's what we're really running into now, is these weather changes are terrible. And Ray gets baseball size hail, and I get pea size hail. So we got risk written all over our industry.
Okay, so let's kind of get into that weather a little bit. So late last summer, last fall, I went down to audit one of Noble Research Institute's courses. It was their intro to regenerative ranching. I think it was 2 days. Good course. A lot of good information. The thing that really stuck out in my mind, I'm thinking about right now, is we were down in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and they said, here at Stillwater, 5 out of 10 years, we're in drought conditions. Okay, I get that. I look back at 30 years, 35, almost 40 years of rain records that my dad has on this property. It kind of looks like 7 out of 10 years, we're in drought. I was talking to my friend Aaron Sawyers a couple weeks ago, previous episode, and he agrees that between 5 and 7 out of 10 years, we're basically in drought. So why don't we just adjust normal? Or why
Yeah.
don't we
At
just
what point do you do that?
prediction?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Normal's not normal like it was 30 years ago or 40 years ago. You're right. But the thing I get a kick out of is you guys that are east of the dry line. I'm talking about I-35 north and south, perhaps being the dry line. Maybe it's just a little bit this west of there, perhaps. But you guys really whine a lot when it doesn't rain. And I mean, hell, we'll go a year with 2 inches. I mean, the ranch, the Chico Basin Ranch, southeast of St. Francis. I'm sorry, southeast of Colorado Springs. The 85,000 acre ranch out there averages 2.5 to 3 inches of rain a year. They're in the shadow of Pikes Peak is the problem, and otherwise it's going to get 12 inches. If a normal kind of a place out there might get that, but my goodness, you guys that are used to 35 inches of rain and you only get 25, that's a drought. But
Yeah.
honestly, it is a drought. Truly it is. And then the deal is that you all down there have got a stocking rate that is double what ours is on pastures, but you've also got continuous cropping. And so you're growing a wheat crop every year on the same ground. Well, we tried to grow more continuous cropping, and it's turned into a complete failure. In fact, when the dirt was blowing here a few weeks ago, it was that ground that's so-called, continuous cropping or trying to pick up a crop every other year or every third year, pick up an extra crop. It just doesn't work. And the guys that went back to the old methods of summer fallow, keeping some good cover on, but summer fallow and raising a crop every year, they had the best wheat and they're going to harvest a nice crop this year. The other guys, it's going to be a bust, but they're going to collect insurance, which I think is ridiculous. Why are we mining this land and just for the insurance payments? We've got one of the most troubling things to me is we're breaking out CRP ground that's been in CRP for maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years. They're breaking out this extremely, rough ground. I mean, it's not even minimal. It shouldn't have ever been broke out. It should have always been left in the grass. But how farmers are, they need the money, and there's a government program, and they're going to get paid to take that out after taxpayers have already invested, $700 an acre in it over 20 years or so to try to get it back to grass to where it doesn't wash away when the hard rain comes. And so that's being broke out all over the country now again. And to me, it's one of the big travesties of farm country.
I agree with you 100%. And I was just thinking, I was listening to you talking, I was just thinking, what's the American taxpayer's investment in farmland? Like, how much the American taxpayer's dollar is actually going to kind of support some of these soil destruction practices? And another reason that CRP, taking that CRP back out of the program, my dad and I were talking about this the other day, because he sits on the county conservation board of supervisors, and the way the subsidies and the insurance and all the commodity price supports are set up, people are taking the CRP out and doubling their money by ripping it up and putting corn in and collecting the insurance on year one. It's like double the profit,
right?
Double the profit. And from a landowner point of view, if you've got a tenant farmer, that's great. That's awesome. But back to your original point, there shouldn't have been anything west of where 35 is right now. Shouldn't have been a whole lot west of that plowed up. Like, we already done screwed up the plains by plowing it once. Some of it we put back, why did we put it back? Because it's highly erodible soil, because it's marginal, because it's not productive. That's why we put things in CRP, right?
That's right. Right. And it would have, and honestly, the grass would have remained had we had a cattle market, had we not been driven out of the cattle business. I mean, you look at anybody right now in the cow business. I don't care if you're selling calves right now at these higher prices. You're not making any money. In fact, why don't you treat your business like Cargill does? Like if you want to treat it like a real business, all right, then let's figure out what your return on invested capital is. Well, it's negative. I mean, then compared to the current land values that Bill Gates and friends are driving higher and higher. So you put your land in at that value, you've got a huge negative return. And now you've got double the interest rates. You've got input costs that have skyrocketed. I mean, what's a pickup cost today compared to the calf? I mean, these guys aren't making any money yet. And so if we had a cattle market that actually paid, a fair price for the livestock based on what consumers are spending, I mean, they could actually be good stewards again. They could actually leave that land in grass and get paid, and family members looking forward to coming back, to take on that next generation and generations to come. That could happen. But we have plowed up grass because of a lack of a cattle market, and we still refuse to address any of the problems that has brought. I mean, so how do you bring back the 10 million cows we've liquidated because there hasn't been a market? How do you bring back the 60 million sheep, which would heal the land and should be put on that highly erodible ground that had been in CRP for 20 years? When it comes out, it needs to be grazed in a very well-managed model. But how do you do that without a steward on the land? How do you do that without a husbandman? I'm talking about a man that grew up on the place, that understands the landscape, knows how many animals that ranch can operate with, and knows when to rotate. I mean, you grow up with that. You don't just, hand that off to some hired hand that shows up tomorrow and hope it's going to get done, because it isn't going to get done. And so all this talk about sustainability is absolute, pure and total BS when it's coming from big corporations. It is not going to work. And honestly, they're looking at from their perspective, what's sustainable. Well, what's sustainable for them is how to look good without being good, and how to really capture the producer into their supply chain and claim their sustainability. Because it certainly doesn't happen after it leaves the ranch. From the ranch all the way to the consumer's plate is a disaster as far as sustainability, as far as good husbandry, as far as stewardship. It's a disaster. And so these big corporations, you were talking about the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, which was formed around 20 years ago.
Okay.
Really, their whole thing was how do we look sustainable?
Before we jump into that, I kind of want to preface this just so you know, and everybody else out there in podcast land knows. I have reached out to the U.S. Roundtable on Sustainable Beef. I've reached out through their website, and I went on their website and looked up like who's who. Okay. So the 2024-2025 chair is a gentleman named Mike Williams from California. I found his website and I reached out to him, reached out through his website directly. So I want to get the USRSB. I want to get them on here to hear their side of the story, right? Because I don't know. And, the rest of this conversation, it's not me making up my mind. I want your opinion on what you think it is, and we're going to have some discussion. And you remember, what was it, like 2 years ago I had you on, and then I had Corbett Wall, and I had Don Schiffelbein on from NCBA.
Sure.
I kind of want to do the same thing. Just tell it in your own words what you feel and what you think. And it's not we don't need to attack anybody. It's just tell the story and let people make up their own minds, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Brian, when was Chuck Schroeder the president of NCBA? So maybe it was 2000, maybe it was 2002. I can't remember when I went to his office in Denver and had a sit-down private meeting with Chuck Schroeder. And Chuck's a good guy. He came from Southwest Nebraska, about 30 miles north of me, out of St. Francis, grew up there in the Hereford business, and, presents himself very well. And yet Chuck had bought into this whole new, long range plan, and they were presenting their long range plan, and I got to tell you, that long range plan was basically at the top, McDonald's and Walmart and the big meat packers, and then how we were going to be more like the chicken industry. Because chicken had presented themselves as being a wonderful industry that had added value, and because they were getting so much more of the consumer meat dollar, I mean, they had grown their demand for chicken on a per capita basis enormously. And so, guys like Andy Gottschalk and a bunch of these other economist types, from land grant universities were thinking, well, beef has to do that. Well, beef needs to, get back their share of that consumer, demand that was lost to poultry. And so they'd really bought into the idea that we got to just go vertical and, throw these cattle guys into something similar to the, a poultry grower relationship with an integrator. And Chuck had fully bought into that idea. And it was really the Walmarts and the McDonald's that those type of companies that were wanting to have these supply chains that they could depend upon, that would give them consistency and supply that they wouldn't have to worry about. And you take like a Cargill, who's contracting beef to a Kroger, even a year out in advance, they needed a supply that they could count on, that they knew was going to be coming through their feedlots to where they could meet that contract requirement that they had with Kroger. And we're talking about quality and price both. And so we were really kind of being pushed, I think, by that chicken model into this sort of supply chain like that with cattle. And of course, the cattle guys are saying, no way in hell, I'm not going to be a chicken farmer. I've got an investment that, the chicken farms pale in comparison to, and I've got all this risk. And as a cattle guy, I just really need a real market. I need a supply and demand market, and I'm happy to take the risk as long as I can be assured that the market is fair and that there's competition in the market. Well, at the same time that this sort of long-range plan was being implemented, contrary to the cattlemen's interests, the big meat packers were putting the small meat packers out of business, and becoming more and more concentrated and becoming much more predatory in the market. And so they were eliminating the competition. And like we say, you can't have really competition without competitors. And so we now lack the competitors. And so feedlots, are very rare that you would see a feedlot that would be able to sell to more than one meat packer, because they delegated the territories and so forth. So basically we're being pushed into this model, whether we like it or not, the poultry model. And we're there really now. I mean, you've got feedlots out there that can't sell their cattle, except to maybe one buyer, and they're 100% a price taker. There is no negotiation.
How could a cow-calf producer try to stay out of that trap?
You got to get real small. You've got to, if you're running 500 cows, you're probably going to have to back that way off. Maybe you I don't want to see you back it off, because I know an operation is nowhere going to pay the bills, with 50 cows or whatever that would allow you to sell more direct to the end consumer. I think end consumers are more interested all the time in buying direct, knowing how that animal was produced, and they want to know animal welfare was good. They want to know performance enhancing drugs weren't used. They want to know it wasn't in 100,000 head feedlot, just stacked into those pens. And when the hot weather hits, a lot of them die. Consumers want to know that now. But the problem is the big companies have got such a marketing machine going where they can basically make themselves look good. I mean, they're going to take your ranch that's in your background right now, that beautiful green grass with cattle and water and all that, and that's going to be the image they put on their product. And
they'll blast that all over and say, look at this environment where our beef is raised, but never show a picture of a feedlot.
No, and I mean a feedlot that's packed and stacked and muddy and, like the Harris feedlot in California, or the big JBS Five Rivers feedlot in Yuma, Colorado. Those are really kind of hard to look at. I mean, seriously hard to look at. And so,
let's be real. We're both cattlemen, and granted, we're kind of on one side of the industry. I would really like somebody to be able to admit, I love feedlots. I love how they smell. I like the mud. I like doctoring cattle every day. I think feedlots are awesome.
When I first started my first feedlot in St. Francis, in Cheyenne County, it was a 14,000 head feedlot. Myself and 9 other partners put that together, and I managed it. And I was just I was 3 years out of college, and I had one of my college friends, Greg Dobish, out of Nebraska, Broken Bow, Nebraska. I spent a fair amount of time on their ranch, during college, working with them part-time and just learning an amazing operation. And Greg came down. He was a cow-calf guy, and they did some backgrounding there on a small feedlot, basically to sell the production of their farm through those animals. But it was a really nice setup. And I asked Greg to come down one winter to help me out. And it was a wet winter, 1978, when we built that operation. It was the coldest winter in Kansas history, and we built it. I mean, we put some teeth on our auger that we drilled post holes with, and I mean, we drilled right down through frozen ground and poured concrete. And I mean, it was brutal. It was seriously brutal. But I was 28 years old, and up to it. And then the very next winter, when I asked Greg to come down and help out, because he was a darn good cattle guy and could, knew how to manage animals and treat animals that got sick. It was the most snow in Kansas history. And so it was a stinker, awful mess. I mean, think about 100 and some thousand head feedlot with 3 days of blizzard, 30 inches of snow going sideways. How well do you get those animals cared for? They don't get fed maybe for days on end. And that's all with hired labor. It's not, the owner's not around. The owners are in New York City, a
Right.
private equity operation. So they're not cared for like they would be if you were at Greg's place in Broken Bow, or my place in Kansas. And we broke our necks trying to get those cattle taken care of. But Greg couldn't, he just didn't want to do that. He was there maybe a couple of weeks, and he says, Mike, man, I can't take this anymore. I can't look at the suffering of these animals. I've got to go home. Where, his cattle had more room in the pens, where the cattle were out on grass or whatever. And yeah, the winter might've been rough on them, but they weren't standing belly deep in mud. And this is what happens when the blizzard comes and your pens have got 3 feet of snow in them, and there's just nowhere to lay down. And I mean, you can't take it as a real steward, as a real husbandman of livestock. You just don't want to see that. And so what we've done is because of a lack of competition and a lack of many buyers out in the marketplace to keep these really good feeding operations, like the Eric Nelsons, the Brett Kinseys, the guys that have a 2,500 head capacity operation that are feeding everything they produce on that farm, and the manure is going back on the land. Now, to me, that's the ideal operation.
Yeah.
And so when the snow hits, I mean, Brett is bouncing out of bed, and so are his kids. And those bunks are scooped, and the feed's in it by 10 o'clock in the morning. And I mean, they're going in and hauling the snow off and scraping and piling, and it's amazing. But those guys, we've lost 85,000 of those guys because of the big guys putting them out of business. And so that we've when you say, get somebody on that says they love a big feedlot, you're not going to find that person. I don't think I don't know how you do. But you do want to support the Greg Dobish kind of operation. And you do want to support the Brett Kinsey and the Eric Nelsons, and the kids are still there. The kids are doing the work. They're learning some things, and that's what's sustainable. Those are the kind of operations that are actually sustainable, and they aren't farming the marginal land. That's grass. And heck, they're even putting manure on that ground like we do at St. Francis. I mean, we're spreading composted manure that contains slaughter waste, biochar, and all of that on actual grassland. And it's beautiful. The impact that has is crazy. The amount of grass you can grow, and the dung beetles are taking that down into the soil profile. But hey, if you've got that kind of an operation without a real cattle market, it might last a half a generation before you get broke. I mean, we simply have got to restore income at the farm and ranch gate, our fair share of that consumer dollar, before any of this can honestly happen. And that's what's so insane, and what makes the global roundtable model, the whole NCBA long range plan, such a debacle, such a big, huge, fat lie. You've got to reduce the power at the top. You've got to break up that concentrated power and wealth. We've always talked about it's concentrated power and wealth in the hands of a few that's the greatest threat to any free society. That's almost becoming self-evident, and it's, by golly, right now it's really showing its face with the concentrated amount of wealth that we have today. But when you've got a Walton family that is so rich, and I mean wanting to maintain that model that puts so many dollars, I mean $4 billion in the first quarter of profit.
Yeah.
I mean, think
Pretty
about
much.
those family members. What are they going to do with all that damn money? Well, you know what they did? They gave it to environmental groups. They gave them grants. Rather than paying their fair share of taxes, they form the foundations, and then they go out and they give environmental groups money, and I call it catch and kill. They go out and give them money so the environmental group hires a new executive director at a pretty big price. They hire a communications team. They go out and they increase expenses dramatically to match the grant that they got from the Walton Family Foundation. And then what's happening right now today is they come in and they pull the funding. So that's a catch and kill. They kill the group. They put them out of business. And now it goes back to the founding member who is so tired, who just doesn't know what to do. I mean, he's spent. In fact, he's 90 years old now. I'm talking about a real group. He's 90 years old now. He can't just come back and run the damn thing after the executive director and all of the staff leaves as a result of the Walton Family Foundation pulling their funding. And so it's really, this is a battle of the richest and most powerful people on the planet wanting to stay rich and powerful. That's what the whole point of the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef is. They want to look good. I remember it's been several years ago, Ranch Foods Direct came up with a new tagline that included the word responsible. And so we put it out there as a tagline. And it took JBS out of Greeley, which is the Brazilian Batista brothers, that, some of the biggest criminals on the planet. It took them 2 weeks to claim that word responsible and to put it all over their website and in their messaging that they were responsible. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth, but this is what's happening. I don't care, whatever niche that you may have created in the last 20 or 30 years. I'm talking about Will Harris, Greg Gunthorpe, myself with Range Foods Direct. I mean, any kind of a niche that would, make your product attractive to a consumer, that would sort of meet their expectation of what they wanted to support. The big guys have captured all of them, every single one of them. And so now you've got Clemens, the big pork factory operation out of Indiana. You've got Miller Poultry, all this so-called antibiotic free, this or that. That's not true. That's just a big fat lie. I mean, when they don't even change the model of their production, how could they be antibiotic free? Well, now we know. Look at the Civil Eats article out today about what happened to antibiotic free chicken. Well, it never was antibiotic free. They just stole the niche. And so, but what that does is it puts the most ideal and best operators, like a Will Harris, a Greg Gunthorpe, folks that have done it actually in reality, puts them out of business. So now Will Harris, what's he going to do to sell ground beef? Well, he's hoping to, sell more on the internet, mail order. Well, it sure would be nice if he could sell to Whole Foods like he did 20 some years ago, but that's not an option anymore. So they really have a way of just going out and putting the ideal operations out of business and making the bad operations look good.
And I see that. And, I hate that this is going to kind of sound like an attack, but okay. So the U.S. Roundtable on Sustainable Beef, they've been around for 20 years. And 20 years ago, yeah, we were still using the word sustainable. Great word. Like, we need to at least hold what we have. But I don't think there's anything. We'll scratch that. There's a lot of things in the beef industry and the beef sector that we don't want to sustain. Like, we want to change them and make them better. The other thing, and the other kind of big problem I have, and this is not just on the US RSB, like, this is on all big corporations. And we can talk about Walmart, we can talk about JBS, we can talk about United Airlines. They love to grab publicity by making these big, flashy, splashy claims. United said, we're going to be carbon neutral with our airline fleet by 2030. Good luck. Like, you might be able to find carbon neutral fuel by 2030, but a carbon neutral airplane by 2030, you're going to have to buy a shitload of offsets every year to even get close to claiming that. Because I'm sorry, there's no way we're going to put 100 tons of aluminum, steel, and titanium in the air and call that green. All the energy it takes to go in to make the airplane, not just to make it fly, all the energy it takes to go into the airplane. How are we going to look at a beef sector and say we're going to be sustainable, which means to not change, right? We're just going to maintain the current status quo. I go on their website. Like, I've spent hours on their website, and there's a ton of pages, and none of them say anything. They make a bunch of claims, say they're going to do a bunch of stuff. They list all the projects. My question is, where are the deliverables? Show me the deliverables. United Airlines, show me your deliverables for getting closer to your emissions targets. JBS, Cargill, McDonald's, Burger King, show me your deliverables for having a better beef supply chain. Show me the deliverables.
Brian, you just described it. You just said how they're going to do it. They're going to do it with offsets. They're going to buy carbon credits. They aren't going to change their operation at all. I mean, it's going to remain the same, but they're going to buy those carbon credits. Well, in order to be able to afford to buy the carbon credits, you got to be seriously profitable. And the way you're seriously profitable and have big margins is by controlling the supply chain, enslaving everyone below you, and capturing their good practices, which honestly they can't deliver long term because they don't have the income to deliver them, because you've stolen it to pay for these stupid offsets and the carbon credits that you're going to buy. So it's a fraud. It is the biggest fraud that I can think of right now. And then the real answer
of carbon credits. I'm also a seller of carbon credits.
Well, what you need instead of selling carbon credits is a price for your cattle. That's what they've done. They've forced you into selling carbon credits instead of livestock at a profitable level that you can maintain your operation. No, I don't want to have to sell carbon credits to stay in business. It's kind of like leasing your ground to the wind industry or the solar industry or whatever it may be that keeps you on the land. It's like CRP. That kept my father-in-law's and mother-in-law's generation out from under a bridge. I mean, we had that whole generation prior to me that was able to live with the CRP. Well, they instead of getting paid for the livestock you're producing and getting a return on your investment and putting some savings in the bank and being able to stand some risk that might come your way, no, they've got all these other ways, these little tricks that you're going to do, whether it's wind, solar, carbon credits. or CRP that's going to keep you in business. And you're basically just being controlled. And your kids aren't ever going to want to come back. I mean, they've left 2 or 3 generations now, have left the farm and have no intention of coming back. And honestly, they don't make very good landlords. Those guys are asking for, they're the ones that have the rent auctions. They go out and make sure they're getting all the rent they can, while some guy that paid too much for the lease is letting their topsoil wash away and blow away, and the land become less valuable.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
One of the things I've been thinking about is, it's a problem we've discussed previously. Are these problems going to get solved with technology, or are these problems going to get solved with more human beings being involved in food?
Well, I think you got to solve it with policy, and you've got to solve it with law enforcement. This is where Lena Khan is amazing. Lena Khan is a gift. You may remember when Obama had the hearings, the antitrust hearings across the country, well attended. Everybody was convinced, okay, now's the time we're going to start enforcing some antitrust laws, and we're going to get some fair income back at the farm and ranch gate through competitive markets. And it didn't happen. Obama didn't do anything. In fact, back then, Eric Holder and Bill Sack and the whole team of folks that had been put together for that antitrust effort went other ways. Phil Weiser is now the Colorado Attorney General. What's weird, he's in the state with Cargill and JBS, and why are we even allow them a corporate charter? I mean, they're criminals. These are terrible corporations. Why in the world are they allowed to operate and continue to fleece the producers and consumers of Colorado or any other state? But anyway, Obama gave it up. Obama didn't do anything about antitrust. And so here we go. Well, Lena Khan, as a young, articulate and very well researched young lady, wrote the article, Obama's Game of Chicken. And it kind of plays off onto the chicken vertical integration type of model. And he gave it up and didn't do anything. Well, now Lena Khan, and this is an article you can look up on the internet, Obama's Game of Chicken, and it's dang well written. But it really does talk about the importance of antitrust law enforcement, which Reagan gave up and said we don't need regulation. They're the enemy. Regulation's the enemy. We need big companies that can do business globally. And really, what we're talking about when you talk about the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef is promoting and sustaining the model of globalization. And this is where the big corporations search the world for the hungriest people who work the cheapest and sell whatever they can, from these resource-rich places in the highest consuming markets and becoming extremely wealthy. I'm talking about Cargill, the modern-day East India Company. Well, Lena Khan sees that damage that's been done by lack of antitrust law enforcement, and so she's the chair of the Federal Trade Commission now. And so going after Microsoft, Facebook, Google. I mean, she's going after these technology companies. And Brian, I've grown to hate technology. Technology is not the gosh damn answer. I mean, I feel like I'm in technology tyranny. You can't do anything without technology. And the deal is, people like Bill Gates love it because, first of all, they want patents on your food, that the GMO technology, the fake meat technology, the whatever technology that gives them control and power is what they want. Now, I want to see it go away. I want to go backwards on technology. Not saying this is good technology, because we get to talk to a lot of people on this type of a podcast. I mean, this is good technology. But there's some really bad technology out there that we shouldn't be using. I mean, our kids have got to get that smartphone taken away from them and kick them outside. They need to go out there and fix your fence. They need to go out there and understand how a cow has a calf, and play and get dirt under their fingernails and, dive in that lake and go swimming if it isn't full of Roundup, or whatever other kind of awful chemical, which it won't be on your place, but technology is not the answer. People on the land, getting up early, eating some breakfast, and getting outside and taking care of nature and animals. That's the answer. And I love what Austin Frerick says. He just wrote the book Barrens, which is a must read. But Austin Frerick says we need more livestock on the land. You look at Iowa, for example. There's no livestock outside. What happened to the milk cows and the cattle and the pigs that used to be, you could drive by farms and see them. Well, they're there. They're still there, but they're in buildings. You can't see them now, but you can smell them. And so, yeah, really great technology. We're putting everything in a building now and controlling their environment. But, we're subsidizing the hell out of it. And you talked about subsidies earlier. If only we knew what our true food cost was. And I've often said as a consumer leaves a Walmart after, aggressively shopping for the cheapest of everything they can find, there needs to be a scanner that would look at their cart and basically put up the real true cost of that food on a big screen TV that everyone can see. And so we're not being fooled. We're not being played for idiots. And that's really what's happening at a Walmart. You're going in there, sure, you're buying something cheap, but my goodness, the cost is enormous when you figure everything that they've externalized on the way to get that on the shelf at a Walmart.
So if you hate technology so much, why don't you take GPS out of your airplane?
No, I didn't say I hated all technology, but hey, Brian, I'm flying across the country, IFR, and I kind of need my instruments to work, right?
Right.
And I get this thing on my Garmin Pilot that said it just quits working. Well, dang, you remember when somebody stole your credit card number and was buying stuff, and the credit card company called you up and said, hey, we got a fraudulent transaction, or you found it and called them. And so you had to get a new credit card.
Okay.
In fact, mine will be here within a week. It happened to me again. But what happened is, you've got people on your credit card that auto pay.
Yeah.
And so Garmin didn't get paid. So they just canceled my subscription. And here I am flying across the country, counting on the weather. I'm counting on all the navigation stuff. And they just canceled it.
It's light.
Yeah, brilliant. You'd have been better off. You'd have been way better off without it altogether. I mean, there ought to be in that sort of technology, there ought to be a whole series of things that happen that would never allow that. I mean, look, your credit card's not going through, but hey, I want you to try to call Frontier Airlines. I want you to try to call Comcast or Dish Network. Call any of these outfits, and I want you to tell me how many of them. I don't care how hard you work at it. Spend whatever time it takes. You can talk to a real person that speaks English.
How are you going to know it's a real person? A generative AI.
That sucks, Brian. That doesn't work. I need to call Frontier Airlines, and I need to change my flight into DC for next week. I need to go a day early. Guess what? You can't talk to them. Nobody will answer a phone. Oh, you can talk to somebody if you pay $35, but then it's still the generative AI for I don't know how long. I've never been able to get through to a real person. So how do I change that flight? Oh, there's going to be some charges for changing that flight regardless. I don't know how it's going to happen, but this is frustrating. We need people doing these jobs again. This is not working. This technology is absolutely not working. And it's power in the hands of too few people, and they've got control over your life. And it's kind of like checking in at the hotel. So you go on Expedia or Travelocity or wherever it is, and they get you this hotel. Well, guess what? The hotels are all owned by the same private equity outfit.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 different companies.
You're being played for a fool. Oh yeah, great. You got a room that's $25 a night cheaper. But and look at the construction on these hotels. Man, you talk about shabby construction. These are not places that are going to last a long time. These are not well-built structures. And they're all it's all return on investment stuff. And
You can walk into a cobblestone inn in Burlington, Colorado. It is, other than looking out the windows, they are literally all of the same inside. All of
Right.
them 100% the same. And you're right. Like the 3+1s, the 4-story hotels, or the 2+1s, the 3 and 4-story chain hotels that are being built. Like you go up to Pratt and there's a line of like 4 of them. You know, it's like a Holiday Inn Express, a Quality, and, you know, a Suites and a Hampton. That's not choice, because all of those hotels are owned by the same chain. They're
Just
owned
like
by
the
same holding.
Just like the groceries in the grocery store. ConAgra owns how many brands? You know, JBS owns how many brands? I mean, we don't have choice.
Yeah,
We've got the illusion of choice.
like JBS, I don't know this, but it seems like, you know, Dillon/Kroger, they buy their meat from one person. They buy all their proteins from Tyson. And then
Right.
you have another chain that buys all their proteins from JPS. And you have another chain that buys all their proteins from Smithfield. Just because there's 15 different brand names on pork products in the grocery store doesn't mean they came out of 15 different plants or even from 15 different companies.
And so what they've done is they've established those supply chains. So Kroger and Cargill, or Walmart and Tyson, or whoever it may be. And now what they're going to do to look sustainable is they're going to take it out of their supply chain. And so for you as a rancher that's producing cows and calves on a Montana ranch, you aren't going to have market access unless you can engage and be part of one of those supply chains. And then they're going to claim what you've always done anyway. It's just like you right now, you're selling carbon credits for something you've already done and always will do. It's not something that you changed. You are the sustainability that they're going to capture into their supply chain to make themselves look good. And so what happened during COVID is Tyson decides they're going to price gouge. And it was, and they remember when they did the New York Times full page and Wall Street Journal full page ad about beef prices are going to increase.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that.
And they stuck it to, this is the time when the big meat packers, having been under the boot of big retail. Before, it wasn't that way. Big meat packers controlled it in both directions, from the supply side to the distribution side. They told the big retailers what they were going to pay. Well, that changed when the concentration at retail got bigger and more powerful than the meat packer concentration. Well, COVID gave the meat packer the opportunity to price gouge, and they did it big time. And so it pissed off Walmart. In particular, it pissed off Walmart. So what did Walmart do? Well, they don't like their supply chain anymore through Tyson.
They bought
So they're trying to build their own, and they've done that through Creekstone, through the contract slaughter they do there, the cut plant they put in out in the east. They've now put in another new cut plant in the Kansas City, Olathe, Kansas area. They've now become a partner in the plant at North Platte that's being built. So they're trying to build this new supply chain that doesn't include the Tyson family and the Tyson Corporation, and in order to maintain their power over everything below them, and everything, you know, is from the consumer perspective. And so this makes them even more dangerous. And it's interesting when you look at that North Platte plant. You know, it started out as this, 1,500 head plant that's going to, serve the interests of some feedlots in Western Nebraska and ranchers and so forth. And they collect all this capital from these guys, and USDA throws some money into the deal. But all along they're figuring out that they're not going to have market access. So they partner with Walmart. So
we've
now
been saying it for 2 years about that exact plant, maybe even 3 years. I've had this conversation before about that exact plant, that a big company, one of the big packers, was going to come in and buy that sucker for 10 cents on the dollar.
Well, and so Trey Wasserberger, the promoter of the whole project, is going around the country and very arrogantly, talking about, oh, this is going to be amazing. And, we've got this great partner now with Walmart, and he's talking about, sustainability and quality and, Angus genetics and all that sort of thing. But and it goes from 1,500 head a day. That's single shift. Now think about this. It's single shift, 1,500 head a day. Well, if Walmart's the partner, they're going to have to double shift because their costs are going to be too high if they don't. But so it just so happens Walmart has a distribution center in North Platte. So let's add a little meat cutting operation on the side of that. And now this North Platte plant can really start cranking up some production. So they go double shift. Okay, now we're at 3,000 head a day. Yeah, but you know what you haven't done yet? You haven't turned the chain speed up. The chain speed like the one in Grand Island, like the Garden City plant, like the Greeley plant, the Fort Morgan plant. Crank it up. Oh, and heck, we're self-inspected now. So we don't have a real USDA inspection anymore. We're going to self-inspect. And so we can just run that chain as fast as we want. So now we're basically got another Garden City. We got another Grand Island. We got another Greeley plant online, but it's controlled by Walmart. And so here this friend of mine is in Missouri. Honestly, he probably raises the best Angus cattle in the entire country. And he's been selling to Creekstone probably for a long time. And he's got the very, very best genetics, Angus genetics that qualify for the export market, which is where the big price is paid, right, to the slaughterhouses. If you can export a high quality product to Japan and Korea, you're getting the top of the market. And of course, those are sales that aren't reported in your normal USDA scanner data that comes out of a big box store.
Right.
And so anyway, he's getting worried. I mean, all he's got is Creekstone. That's his only buyer. And he's starting to get worried. And so he calls up Trey Wasserberger in North Platte and he says, "Hey, Trey, when your plant gets up and running, are you going to be doing any programs like export, hormone antibiotic free, high quality, prime, whatever stuff?" He says, "Yeah, but you're going to have to use my genetics." Brilliant. See, that's where we're headed. If we don't do something, they're going to own you. And here my friend is got the best genetics, is now going to have to go backwards, perhaps, buy in genetics for some guy that promoted a meat plant in Nebraska. He's going to have to buy his genetics. And this is what's going to happen to the brazen beef that goes through Adams Line and Cattle. That's the Tyson. It's a supposedly sustainable brand. It's what's going to happen to everybody. And you will be a chicken farmer, except you're going to be way worse off than a chicken farmer because you've got a lot more invested and a lot more risk.
Okay. I'm going to segue into a different subject, but it is related. So some of the discussions I've had, my friend Hobbs Magaret, he seems to think that the U.S. cow herd could be in terminal decline. Like we have over the last 4 or 5 years of drought and market conditions, we've drawn our cow numbers down and sent too many heifers to town. So there's not enough replacements in the system. Do you see that as a problem?
I think it's been a problem for a long time. We've liquidated already 10 million cows. We've liquidated 60 million sheep.
Okay.
This is going to be permanent if we don't get a market back and start paying people, an income high enough to sustain their operations. And so more and more of these ranches are going to the wealthy, the folks with too much money. And they're parking their cash into these ranches and taking them out of production, or they're getting rid of the cows and running a handful of buffalo. And so we've done absolutely nothing to turn this thing around. And the only way you turn this thing around is you give a fair price back to the rancher and he recovers that lost share of the consumer dollar that he's had over the last 30 some years. If you go to my blog at MikeCallicrate.com and click on the blog, today it'd be the second post that's down on that blog that talks about the maker-owned marketplace. But there's a graph on there. There's a chart on there that shows the producer share of the consumer dollar in relation to the big retailer and the meat packer. Until we can restore income at the farm and ranch gate, we are terminally ill and dying.
The other thing that I kind of wonder is, with the cow herd being drawn down, and I've said this for quite a while, and I'm going to stand by this statement. We still have too many of the wrong cows. And maybe as the cow herd continues to shrink, as we start to reverse that, if we can reverse that, we need to be looking at animals that are not like the current ones. We need to be looking at a little bit smaller of a frame animal. We need to be looking at something that's a little bit more forage efficient, in my opinion. But I can also see how through market monopoly that the big packers and the organizations that they kind of have captured, something like, NCBA, we all love to pick on NCBA, U.S. Premium Beef comes to mind. These other organizations that they have captured, when it comes time to rebuild the cow herd, are they going to be like, no, you guys are incompetent and you can't make your own breeding decisions anymore. If you want to sell to us, now you have to be in this U.S. Premium Beef program, and you got to buy your bulls from people that are in the program. Like, won't name any names, but we know who we're talking about.
Well, why not? Why wouldn't you name names, Ryan?
I mean, well, Mark,
I think I think your listeners deserve the name Mark Gardner. Yeah, I mean, come on. Yeah, the deal is, Brian, if you're going through any existing supply chains that get you to a slaughterhouse, they're going to want bigger is better. The deal is they like 1,600-pound fat cattle. And the reason they like 1,600-pound fat cattle is because you got more meat in the truck at the end of the day with 1,600-pound live animals than you do with 1,100 and 1,200-pound animals, right?
Yeah.
And so from an efficiency, economies of scale perspective that the accountants care about out in New York City, where Pinnacle's located, that supplies the Five Rivers money to be partners with JBS, they want bigger animals. And so bigger animals are not the answer to consumer demand. I mean, I don't want a ribeye that's 18 ounces. I don't want to have a half-inch thick ribeye. I want an inch and a half thick ribeye. But and at my age today, you're probably going to want to share that with somebody anyway. But honestly, we're crazy with where we've gone with these cattle. And so the big packer wants 1,600-pound animals, but they really want to be able to discount you on those cattle, even though they're hitting their premium market and they're making them more money because they have more meat in the truck at the end of the day. But what happens when you make an animal 1,600 pounds? You're going to get a lot more fat. Well, where does that fat go? Well, Eldon Roth, with his Empirical Beef, formerly Beef Products Incorporated, has probably got a plant near you where he takes the fat trim. And so you're going to get paid for the fat trim. And he's going to centrifuge that, and he's going to heat it and centrifuge it, and he's going to pull off whatever connective tissue and stuff that's not fat out of that trim, and he's going to make a product called pink slime. And it's not muscle, it's just stuff. It's stuff that's not fat, but he gets to call it lean. And so now what we've got is we've got waste fat that's coming out of those big slaughterhouses. And that's probably going to be turned into sustainable aviation fuel. Really? How sustainable was it to make that animal 1,600 pounds and
with
go through
soybeans?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what they're going to do with that. But then other excess fat that you've put it on as a producer, you've put all that fat on at great expense. Then that's going to get blended with imported lean. So the imported lean is going to come in. Huge amounts of it because you've liquidated your cow herd and don't have that many cows and bulls to slaughter for the lean. So now we're going to bring in that imported lean, and we're going to mix that with more of that waste fat that you put on those 1,600-pound fat cattle. And we're going to add the pink slime to it at about 10 or 12% inclusion rate. And we're going to come up with $2.50 ground beef. Try competing with that as an independent local regional slaughter facility that got some grant money from USDA to build your plant and to serve the needs of your community. You can't compete. And so it's half your cost of production. So these are some serious problems in the industry right now. that we're gonna have to deal with. But you talk about the genetics and an animal that fits the landscape and is more forage efficient, which is truly what we need and what we had 40 or 50 years ago. We had that, but we were, your finished slaughter weight was 1,200 pounds. And in fact, I wrote a paper at CSU in my animal science course. I wrote a paper and I projected that we could produce a 1,200 pound finished animal in a year. And so what we were doing is we were running a Charolais cow we were running an Angus cow with a Charolais bull, hopefully an easy calving bull, which at the time you probably didn't have. But I projected if we could raise have an Angus cow, a Charolais bull, put it in the feedlot at weaning time, and just feed it normal, no performance enhancing drugs, which that's 150 pounds of the finished weight today. We could produce an animal, we could produce that finished animal in a year. But that's back when I was at a land-grant university learning the industrial model. And so why not slow it down a little bit here, get rid of the performance enhancing drugs, and produce an Angus cow with an Angus bull or an Angus cow with a Hereford bull and produce real quality. I mean, I'm talking about high choice and prime beef and get them dead in 18 months. That's what I want to see happen.
I want to know, because you're on both sides and you're vertically integrated. I mean, you're vertically integrated from conception to consumer, right?
Correct. Yes.
You've got grass, you've got a feedlot. Since you're on all sides of the sector and all around the business, what do you think a cow should look like? I mean, breed, feed, days to maturity, weight. Like, what kind of cows should we be breeding that are the balance of profitability for the cow-calf man and profitability for the packer and feeder?
Well, I think we can run an Angus, red Angus. I like red Angus a lot, but I like an Angus or a red Angus cow that's going to weigh, 1,200 pounds. I'm going to breed her to a Wagyu bull because I want that extra marbling for my meat program. But you can breed that cow to another English cross, and I'm going to want to wean a calf that's probably going to be right at 500 pounds. And I'm going to put that calf into a backgrounding operation, and I'm going to grow it up to about 750, and I'm going to then put it on a finished diet that's not too much grain, that's got enough roughage to maintain good rumen health, and that won't require any antibiotics to keep it alive and to prevent liver abscesses. And so I'm going to finish that animal. I would like to finish it on barley if I could. I like barley because it is a dry land crop and it's not going to deplete the Ogallala aquifer. It's not going to require irrigation. And so the good land that I've been growing wheat on for Cargill and ADM, I'm going to convert that to barley, and I'm going to feed livestock with that barley, pigs and cattle. And so then I finish those animals out on that barley, which is way friendlier to the rumen as well, because it's got a higher roughage component. And it makes the fat whiter and it's prettier. And so that's what I'm going to want to produce. But I'm going to lean towards the English breeds that are more forage efficient, as you described.
Okay. I appreciate that perspective because, we talk about a lot of stuff, but, things have to make sense. Things have to work for not just one part of the industry or not just, one little segment of the industry. Things have to work for everybody up and down the value chain. And well, I mean, clearly there's a lot of things in the value chain that aren't working for some of us, but I guess what I'm thinking of is just, the more we win and the more we share our wins, the more we can all win together.
Right.
I'd hope. So a couple thoughts that I had while you were going. We were talking about like meat packing plants, specifically that Nebraska plant. And one of the thoughts that I wrote down that I've had the last couple of days is one of the major control points in the beef industry. It's not the packer. I think it's the cold storage and inventory. because having a large amount of product in cold storage and inventory, the packers have, they're maybe a little more insulated from some things in the market or supply side disruptions, right? That's why they have the inventory, the cold storage inventory, so they're a little bit more insulated from supply side shocks or plant shutdowns, things like that. But the thing that we don't know is how much they have in cold storage and how much inventory they have. All we can really do is kind of look at gross statistics of plant throughput. But we don't know how much is on the market. We don't know how much is getting sold. We don't know how much is in cold storage. The only thing we know is plant throughput. How does that add up, and what does that matter? I don't know. If I had 180 days worth of supply in my warehouse and price really goes up on the supply side, I can idle a plant and I can sell out of cold storage, and I can wait till prices get better, and then I can refill my cold storage. I wonder how much of that goes on. And one of the other big things I wrote down, and this is when you were talking about running multiple shifts in the plant. You can't run 3 shifts in a meat plant. You can't run 24/7. You have to shut down and clean it, right?
Yes.
How many of those plants have been cleaned with child labor?
A lot.
And nobody cares. Nobody's
Yeah.
making a big deal out of it, that we have, like, our food system is so fucked. Our meat plants are staffed with immigrant labor and cleaned with child immigrant labor.
Right. So, Brian, let's go back to that cold storage question that you had. Yeah. One thing we've just got to stop thinking is that there's a market. There hasn't been a market for 30 years. Since we lost all the competition, there hasn't been a market. But you're thinking about, well, what about all this cold storage, and they could survive without, slaughtering for a period of time. The last thing big meat packers want is inventory. Inventory is money in cold storage.
Yeah.
And they don't want that. They want to move it out. They need to pay the bills. They get, the executives are wanting their bonuses. The shareholders are wanting their returns. The last thing they want is that. But if you want to talk about the real inventory that allows them to stay out of the market, it's on the other side. It's the live animal inventory. It's their relationship with the 100,000 head plus feedlot operators that are supplying cattle that they know damn well they're going to get. I remember during our lawsuit against Tyson IDP, Bruce Bass was on the stand. He was on the witness stand in Montgomery, Alabama, as the last defense witness. And the question was asked, about their captive supply arrangements. And, we did discovery and we never found anything in writing. And Bruce Bass said, well, we've got over 1,000 different arrangements with feedlots, for anywhere from a locked-in captive supply like a Cactus Feeders to a relationship situation with a Nebraska farmer feeder. And he says none of the 1,000 or 1,200 of whatever those agreements were in writing. But that's the inventory that you have to worry about. It's not cold storage. It's the supply of cattle to where they can step out of the market, like they did in 1994. In the spring of 94, they stepped out of the market for 6 weeks and dropped the live price $17 a hundred, which instigated a huge pushback from cattle feeders. And we had a meeting in Omaha, and they put $12 back on the market the next week after that hell raising in Omaha. So they and the thing about Cargill, and you look at Cargill wanting to contract out with someone like a Kroger, and maybe even a year in advance, they can establish price and supply. Well, they do that with their live animal inventory. Well, Cargill didn't like feeding cattle. They did a terrible job. You've got all these 100,000 head operations around the country with, hired hands operating them, and refugee workers, working in them. And they just don't provide the care that's required to really do it right. And so basically what they did is they handed off their feedlots to Green Plains, and a separate operation, and no doubt gave them a sweetheart deal. Basically something probably that they couldn't lose money. But at least then you get somebody else owning them while still controlling that inventory, knowing you're going to get all of those animals into your slaughterhouses at some point. But just to give you an example of why that is nothing new, back in the late 90s, when we were suing IBP, David Domina, the lead attorney in the Pickett IBP case, the cattleman's case for fair markets, represented Robert Cook. And remember that hell-raising meeting we had in Omaha after IBP dropped the market $17? There was an attorney by the name of Robert Cook who represented a group of feeders out of Nebraska and was suing IBP. And basically through discovery, well, first of all, he got countersued. Well, first of all, he got sued by IBP for what he said at the cattlemen's gathering. He let it rip, but he was 100% correct in what he said. But IBP, being the strong arm that they are, wanting to intimidate him, sued him. Well, in the defense and through discovery, they found out the Amarillo plant at one time had, during this period we were talking about, had 122% captive supply. So they had 22% more animals than they could get slaughtered. So what happens? How strong are they going to bid in the market the next week? Even IBP didn't realize the power they had to reduce the price at the farm and ranch gate. And once they do that, and they can get all the land grant economists to talk about, oh, it's a market, it's supply and demand, and it's all just a big, massive lie, then they can really put that percentage of the consumer dollar they stole from the producer in concrete and never, ever have to give it up, and build a business on that, with executive pay skyrocketing, with shareholder returns going up, buying out any other remaining competition that's out there. And now it's in concrete. These guys are going to they're going to leave the producer of livestock with a few crumbs of the leftovers. Everything else is going to go up the chain to the packer and to the retailer.
Okay. So in a lot of these captive supply type agreements, things are priced on a grid or formula, because that's kind of like what they say is fair, right? Like, okay, here's the grid formula. How does the base price get set on those?
Oftentimes the base price is set on the cash market. Well, what's the cash market if they don't need anything?
I mean, so we're going to set the price of 100% of the livestock movement on basically less than 15% of it.
Yeah, and that's with a weak seller setting, providing the base price. I mean, a price taker, someone who has no power in the market. So, and that then we're talking about some alternatives. Maybe, well, we need to set it on box beef. Well, why? You need to set it on the retail price, what consumers are actually paying. Actually, you need to set it on the hotel restaurant trade. What they're peeling off the better meat off the top, and what's left over then gets sold at the big retailers. So the big retailers are not selling, the quality, the high end product that went over to Korea, that went over to Japan, that went to the HRI trade, the hotel restaurant institutional trade, and the leftovers are really sold at retail. But even when you look at that number, go to USDA meat price spreads, and you can look at what the average price is at the big box retail level. And today it's over $8. Well, my goodness, that's, here's a calculation you can put in your head. Take the live animal weight times 0.42% to get the saleable pounds of meat. Okay. I've got a calculator. Let me just run it.
It's 420 pounds on a 1,000-pound animal.
No. Well, no, but yeah, we're talking 1,500-pound live animals. So
I was trying to make easy math, because you said
but 1,000 pound, that's a feeder animal, Brian. So let's do this. Okay. Let's take, let's just say it's 1,350, I mean, they're bigger than that, but let's say it's 1,350 times 0.42%. Okay. That's 567 pounds of meat that's saleable at retail. But what if you left the bone in? What if you were going to sell to friends and neighbors and they like the bone-in ribeye and they like the bone-in 7-bone chuck roast and all that? So it's better, right?
Yeah.
But it's also worth 5% weight. So we're being conservative at 42%. That's 100% boneless animal. So now take that times $8, $4,538 is your price or is what it's worth if you can sell direct. Of course, you've got to, now you have to subtract off the processing, the slaughter and the processing, the packaging and so forth. So let's just say that's $1,000. So let's take $1,000 off of that.
And that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. So now we have $3,536 left. Now divide that by 1,350 pound live weight. So that's 260. That's 262 a pound live.
And that's what you call like a rail price?
No, that's the fat cattle standing on the ground live weight price.
Okay.
And today you've got $1.80 fat cattle market. So that's 100. So that's,
so it's 75.
That's 80 cents. That's 80. I mean, why isn't everybody selling all the meat they can to friends, neighbors, and family at $8? That's less than the ground beef price at Whole Foods. Come on. I mean, that's a bargain to the consumer. And if you can go through that local, regional, small USDA inspected plant, help them and sell as much meat as you can to the consumer, that's what you should be doing. But when you're offered $3 and change for a calf off the cow, it's so much more than you were getting that you're saying, the heck with selling meat, I'm going to sell calves. That disrupts the whole system where consumers were hoping to buy direct. Now the consumer's forced to go back to Walmart because you aren't selling meat this year. So you're not staying consistent. And that's the fool's game we've been playing ever since Mel Coleman came up with the idea, not Mel Coleman, Mel Potter, the better beef concept. He was the cranberry guy, that bush and spray cranberry guy that in the 80s said he was mad because the Packers had rigged the market and lowered the price. And so he started talking about this other pathway to the market. Well, it failed because the big Packers raised the price on feeder cattle and took all the inventory away. And so this is what's happening now. They raise this calf price. You know darn well it's going to be temporary and they don't want to pay it, but they're going to pay it for a little bit to disrupt the whole system that we've been trying to build. And that's that more direct sale from ranch to plate.
And I'll be honest, that's why I made the decision to punch out last year and sell my calves, sell my future production, because I looked at the price, I looked at my economics and my projected cash flow, and I wasn't ever going to make any more money than I was on those animals than by selling them early. And
but here's the deal, Brian.
I've said
a rancher has to be able to ranch.
Yeah.
The rancher should not have to be in the meat business. It's a true serious pain in the ass to be in the meat business. You honestly just need a competitive market. I mean, if you're the kind of guy that can do some direct sales to consumers, that's awesome. You should do it, but it's got to be in a way that you can sell the whole animal. This is why we did if you go to MikeCallicrate.com, there's a button on there called Cow Pool.
I was going to ask about Cow Pool.
Well, sell the whole animal. I mean, so the cow pool it's gone. That you don't have a bunch of trim in a freezer somewhere wishing somebody would buy the grind. The whole animal's gone. And so the consumer gets to buy an eighth, a quarter, a half, or a whole. And oftentimes they get friends and family to come in and help. And so they buy the whole animal. But that's good for the processor because it's fast, it's easy, it's standard cut, it's bone in typically. You kill them and they're gone, and you can do more animals, as opposed to all this value added stuff that no processor can afford to do for a customer without charging quite a lot. So the cow pool is really cool. But if you can do some of that as a rancher, or maybe you've got some kids that are pretty technologically adept, let them go ahead and start their little meat program, to justify they're coming back to the farm. It works in special places. But what I really want to see is I want to build these marketplaces that are maker owned, where the rent collector is not coming in and driving your butcher shop out of business, or driving your restaurant out of business, or driving the ice cream maker out of business. that they've got a safe place in a public market format where they can all own a piece of it. And then you get, and that just helps improve buyers, more buyers in the market. And we got to get back to where ranchers can ranch and actually be the stewards that we hope they can be.
Yeah, I agree. And it's that stewardship that's hard, because we have so many pressures on us. Like, we talked about earlier about CRP getting broke back out. And that's habitat. That's habitat for wildlife. That's habitat for birds. That's habitat for microbes, fungi, invertebrates in the soil. And gosh, it's just really hard for me to swallow a farmer saying, I'm a good steward of the land, as he pulls a plow through already fallow soil, and the spray plane is spraying herbicide the next field over. I have a really hard time buying you're a steward of the land. Besides that, we've talked, continuing theme in our conversations is profitability, bringing profitability back to the farm and ranch gate. And I think the days of being able to go buy grass, and pay for it with cows have long passed. I still think it's possible to go buy grass, and pay for it with multi-species grazing. But I also think that those days, the sun will set on those days. And as we move toward the future, in order to stay on the land, because of appreciating, rising land cost and every other challenge that we're dealing with, the profitability from livestock, it's not going to go up. I just don't see that the profitability of any livestock enterprise is going to start appreciating with the rate that land appreciates, with the rate of inflation. Right. So,
well, Brian, go back to the concentration of power and wealth in the hands of a few. As long as you've got Bill Gates and a bunch of these other rich people, that the only place they can park cash is in your land, and inflate those values, that's a real problem. And for you have to come up with, all kinds of different enterprises and multi-species and all this other kind of stuff to buy land. Makes no sense. What we've got to do, as far as policy is concerned, is we've got to keep people like Bill Gates from owning the land. You might have to live on it. In fact, you might have to figure out, some tax policy that really deters people like that from owning land at all. Nebraska used to have a really strong corporate land ownership ban. And the first thing they do is they get enough power and lobbying that they come in and they reverse that corporate farming law in Nebraska. We had a corporate farming law in Kansas as well. We've forgotten what happened, back in 1900. The last time the barons, like Austin Freerick writes about today in his new book, The Barons, the new age barons, we forgot what happened back then. And the corporate farming laws that we passed to keep family farmers farming have all essentially been eliminated. And now we're back and we're in way worse shape than we were then. And we've got to bring some of that back again to make land affordable, or we're not going to be eating in the future.
And that's kind of where I was going, because you have, like me, I've got some hunting, I've got carbon, I've got another enterprise, and I've got cows, and all those go into the basket. And then, land management tasks come out. Anyway, if farming and ranching is a money losing thing in 2024, the way to stay in business is you have to borrow against the appreciating equity that you have in your property base, and you continuously withdraw that equity in order to maintain a standard of living. Then when the time comes to sell out your place, you need that premium price for it because you've already pre-sold half your equity out of it. And I get land as a great investment because they don't make any more of it. I get that. It's a limited quantity. But like you said, and I've said, we have people buying land and taking it out of production, buying rangeland and taking it out of production because they want to hunt deer, and they think that for some reason having cattle graze grass hurts deer hunting. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. So there's a lot of what we have is we have companies with money. I mean, even private people with money. Okay, I can afford to buy this property at this rate, and all I have to do is just own it for 20 years and then I can double my money. Cool. I don't have to maintain it. I don't have to do anything. I can go hunt deer on it. Cool. But what does that do? It takes more acres out of production. It's unmaintained land from people that generally, I mean, painting with a broad broom here, there's a lot of absentee landowners, deer hunters that don't want to maintain a fence. Okay, fine. All you got to do is do your half. I'll do my half and we'll all be happy. But sometimes it's a stretch to even get them to do that. And then when the grass isn't grazed, we know what happens to that. Kind of becomes a fire hazard. If the land's not maintained, at least here where we're only slightly wetter than St. Francis, it's going to turn into a cedar forest. Or if you're on the river bottom, it's going to get overrun with elm, locust, and catalpa. So it's like they don't have to bear the cost of not maintaining that land. Fucking neighbors do, because the trees don't respect a fence line.
Or the prairie dogs.
Or the prairie dogs. I mean, deer don't respect the fence line either.
Right.
I mean, just to be quite frank with you. So we have Barber County is 40%. My dad actually spent enough time with the plat book. He sat down with the plat book and he went through it pretty much page by page. It's like, okay, who owns this piece? Where do they live? Who owns this piece? Where do they live? He figured up over 40% of Barber County is owned by people that do not live in the county. And the percentage of land that's actually owned and managed by somebody that lives here is shockingly small.
So we change that with policy, Brian. We change it with policy. People who are not farmers, we don't really want them owning the land. So make it harder for them to do that. Stop giving them the agricultural benefit of, the tax treatment that ag gives if it's not really ag. If it's a hunting operation, it's not ag. I mean, that's the kind of policy you've got to have. And it's going to take a complete turnover of Congress, state and national, to get this done, because these rich guys own our current Congress and they own it all. And so it really requires all these folks that have been trying to figure out how to survive. There's so few of us left. I mean, we saw what's gone on in Europe with the protests, the farm protests, and it's amazing what's gone on. Even India, look at the turnout they had there when government was trying to make policy harder on family farmers. I mean, look at Joe Rogan's rant from yesterday, talking about, they're doing that to farmers, the people who feed us, and lots of expletives, but that's what's going on, and people have to wake up. And we cannot let Bill Gates and these, Ted Turner types and John Malone's and those kind of folks park their excess cash in our production unit. And as you said, the most important negative impact that occurs is that land goes out of production. Well, the land is where wealth is created. How are we going to pay the $30 trillion debt if we don't produce? We've actually got to make something or grow something to pay that debt, not just print more money. We've got to do it at some point, and we can't have our production source, which is our land, taken out of production based on all the things you just commented about. So we've got to make it harder for rich people to own land and a lot easier for family farmers to buy it, own it, and pass it down to the next generation.
And that's producing an actual tangible thing.
You just described all the stuff you've done to stay on your land. You're even getting carbon credits. You've got hunting. You've got a cow herd, and you've got something else. How about a podcast? I hope it makes money. But I want you to consider this. I want you to consider the number of calves a year or number of cattle a year your ranch could produce. And I want you to just add to that income, not just what the market is today, which is $3 for a 5-weight calf, whatever that might be. I want you to add $1,485 to that.
Okay.
That would get you back. That would get you back to what you were getting in 1970 as your share of the consumer dollar. How would your place work with an additional $1,485 income per calf? Hey, you know what? You can the 2 jobs that you have in town, they're out of here. You don't have them anymore. You're back on the ranch. You're rotating your cattle. You're putting up fence. You're doing all these wonderful things for habitat improvement. You're doing that. So, and you're saying, and I'm saying, well, what $1,485? What's that? Well, that's that 1,350 pound animal times the difference that you're selling for in the market today at $1.80 versus the $2.60 something a pound you got for it selling direct to consumers. That's $1,485. We did the calculation earlier.
Yep.
So that's how much is there if you want to sell meat instead of livestock. And so that's what I do with Ranch Foods Direct. I sell meat instead of livestock, and I've been at it 24 years now. And honestly, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's no fun. I mean, honestly, it's a lot of fun to be in the retail store and talk to customers. That's the most fun because people love you and they love your product and they want you to have more locations and all that. So that's great, but it's way hard. It's really hard to do it all. And no one should be expected to do that ever. You should be able to raise cattle and that's it. You ought to be able to have a competitive market that pays you a fair value, and consumers ought to have a fair deal at the retail counter. That will never happen with Walmart and Kroger, Tyson, Cargill, JBS, and Marfrig in the equation. So we've got to build that alternative pathway to the consumer. You can't break them up either because they're too big to fail. And so you've got to build the alternative pathway and promote that and support that. And then you're going to end up with a food system that works eventually.
I hope someday we can get there. I really do. This has been a lot of fun, Mike. Been at it for a little over an hour and a half. I need to get to the ranch and check on some water because wasn't quite moving enough water yesterday. I don't know if I had a pump go down or if I've got a problem with the line, but I reset everything and it started making water. So I need to get out there and check it again.
Okay, Brian. Thanks for this opportunity. I love what you do.
Well, I always appreciate your time. Appreciate your thoughts, Mike. Anything you want to wrap up with?
I don't know. Just hope it keeps raining out our way and that we can, just make our consumers happy and continue to build these alternative pathways to the consumer. So check out the blog, MikeCallicrate.com. And I'd love for you, Trinity Vanderakers put an interview, which is the top post on there, the first post you'll look at that I think's worth looking at. But the next one is the make your own marketplace. I described that, and that's what I think we have to build.
Yep. And blog is MikeCallicrate.com.
Correct.
All right. Make sure we get a link in the show notes.
Thank you, Brian. All right. You have a good day.
You too. And gang, have a great week. We'll see you.